What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of WNBA Today on CLNS, reacting to the big news of Sandy Brondello reportedly being hired by the Toronto Tempo as their first ever head coach. First reported by the Next's Howard McDowell, but since confirmed by multiple sources. This is big news, for one, because you see Sandy Brondello was one of the biggest names out there as a head coach candidate. Recently let go by the New York Liberty after 4 seasons at the helm, just 1 year removed from a WNBA title, which is pretty mind boggling. But honestly, the writing was on the wall, and we reacted to this firing, or I shouldn't even say firing, because ultimately her contract just wasn't renewed. We reacted to it when it happened, and general manager Jonathan Cole made clear that it wasn't just because the Liberty had a first round exit this season. It was also the result of just process, and they want to get the best coach possible for this group, for this organization. And Sandy Brondello, a former WNBA player who's been an all-star, who's now won 2 titles with 2 different organizations, the Phoenix Mercury in 2014 and the Liberty in 2024, they felt like she was no longer the person to be leading that organization. And so she becomes a coaching free agent in an offseason where, once again, there are a ton of opportunities out there. The Portland Fire were looking for a coach, the Toronto Tempo, the Seattle Storm, who let go of Noah Quinn, and then, of course, the Dallas Wings, who fired Chris Coklanes after 1 season. 4 opportunities in addition to this Tempo one. And I would have been shocked if at least, one organization didn't ultimately select Sandy Brondello, who is just the most proven candidate out there. Freshly off of coaching for a major organization, multiple titles under her belt, intimately familiar with the WNBA, both from a basketball X's and O's standpoint, but also from the reality of the fact that, you're an expansion coach. Like, you're going to be trying to recruit free agents. You don't have a ton of credibility yet as an organization. I'm sure that Sandy Brondello, who has coached so many great players in this league, who has played in this league, will help the Tempo when it comes time to recruiting free agents and kind of building their first ever roster. So totally understand the hire. It's interesting because there are multiple directions now that organizations can go in when it comes to selecting their head coach. You saw with the Portland Fire, they went more the NBA route, where they selected Alex Samaro, who is currently or was currently a Cleveland Cavaliers assistant coach, their head of player development. And he comes from this kind of like future of basketball. He had run programs where he was innovative, and the whole if you relook at his background, it's very different than someone like Sandy Brondello, who has just a very traditional, been a coach in the WNBA for a long time background. I think we're going to continue to see the split where some teams want a proven WNBA person, whether it's somebody that's long been an assistant, like a Bree January type, who's currently an assistant for the Indiana Fever, who I think could get an opportunity here this offseason with one of these remaining openings. Or there's a ton of assistant coaches who have that experience. I loved like the Natalie Nakase type hire, where it's somebody that is intimately familiar with the WNBA, who has coached for a veteran, successful head coach, and now gets their opportunity to actually lead an organization. I think that you're going to see some of that, and then you're going to see like the Nate Tibbetts Phoenix Mercury style, where a franchise says, you know what, we're going to take someone from the WNBA. We want to be super analytically driven and take someone over from a league that has kind of longer relied on analytics and on a deeper level, and kind of go in that direction. And there's obviously pros and cons to both. I do think that the value of a coach being intimately familiar with this league is a little bit underrated at this point, because NBA, WNBA basketball, very different leagues, very different play styles. And there is an advantage to not having that learning curve of like, not only are you a brand new coach for this franchise, but you're also brand new to this league. I think you're going to see with the Portland Fire, I'm sure they're going to have a little bit of a learning curve as their coaching staff kind of gets their sense around the WNBA and how kind of best game plan there. Sandy Brondello, I think she's going to know what to expect better from the jump. Does that mean that she's a better hire long term? We have no idea at this point. But I do understand the appeal if you're the Tempo and you're trying to get things started, and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to get buy-in? How are we going to build our first roster? We don't have details right now around what the expansion draft is going to look like, but presumably in the next few months, there will be an expansion draft similar to what we saw with the Golden State Valkyries last December. I think Sandy Brondello helps make that experience a little bit more seamless. She's well respected. As I mentioned, she's won titles with 2 different organizations, and she's just 1 year removed from a WNBA championship with the Liberty. And I don't think it was the perfect run. It's something that I think a lot of people have alluded to, that despite the fact that the Liberty won that title, there was a little bit of the sense of they underperformed throughout that playoff run, throughout that final series, which they ultimately win in overtime of Game 5. But Sandy Brondello didn't get the boot right after that. That would have been pretty wild if Sandy Brondello got the boot right after a title. But I think the first round exit this season was kind of her last straw. And for people who have covered her closely and been around that team, I think it wasn't as shocking as it was for a lot of fans at home who were like, "Wait, she just won a title and now she lost her job." So we now have two of these vacancies have been filled, but the Seattle Storm and the Dallas Wings still have openings, and I think it's going to take time, as well as the New York Liberty, of course, that still have an opening. And the Liberty, I would imagine, are going to have a very comprehensive process because if you fired Sandy Brondello, you opted not to re-sign her. And as I mentioned, she immediately became probably the top candidate in the field. You now want to make sure you get this hire right because you didn't just let go of your not to throw shots at anybody else, but somebody like Chris Claims who had a tough rookie debut as a head coach, had never really been a head coach before, was an assistant at USC. Like, you let go of him. There's a lot of other comparable candidates from a resume standpoint. Sandy Brondello, you let go of her. It's like you're in a tough spot now as an organization to make sure that you one up your previous head coach hire because that's what you ultimately want to do if if you're in charge of that organization. So 3 openings currently remain. I don't know if any other coaches are going to get the boot. Typically, it happens pretty quickly. So I would imagine that if you're a head coach of an organization, whether you're Tyler Marsh of the Chicago Sky or Rashid Mezian of the Connecticut Sun, you're good to go. I interviewed Morgan Tuck, the general manager of the Connecticut Sun, on this channel. You can find that 25-minute interview. It's the video literally right before this on WNBA Today on CLNS. So she pretty much confirmed that they liked what Rashid did in year 1. It wasn't perfect, but he is going to get another chance at the helm here, and they want some continuity year to year. So his job should be safe. I'm trying to think who else was kind of near the bottom of league standings. But I think that's probably it for now. I think everybody else, Tyler Marsh, he didn't have a great season with the Sky, but it's also his first year. They also fired Teresa Witherspoon after 1 year. So at a certain point, you got to give people an opportunity to coach for a couple years and try to build off of the previous season, especially with these rosters that had very clear flaws. Kurt Miller, general manager of the Dallas Wings, clearly did not believe that Chris Claims needed a second year to kind of figure out if he was the right guy for the job. The Dallas Wings finished with the worst record in the WNBA, despite having some talented players and an incredible rookie debut from Paige Beckers, who was named Rookie of the Year almost unanimously. So 3 head coach hirings remain. I think we're going to see a lot of the same names circling for a lot of those hires. Bunch of candidates that I'm excited about. I mentioned Bree January, Indiana Fever assistant coach. I think Teresa Witherspoon, former Chicago Sky head coach and former player, is somebody else that could be in the mix. Minnesota Lynx assistant Rebecca Brunson, Los Angeles Sparks assistant Latricia Trammell. I know Nola Henry, assistant coach of the Dallas Wings, who also coaches at Unrivaled. She's someone that fans have been excited about. Christy Tolliver, Phoenix Mercury assistant coach, is also a name that I think she's pretty much poised and ready for a head coach opportunity. So that's just a short list. Sonia Ramon. There's a bunch of assistant coaches in this league who have played in this league, who have been assistants for a long time and are basically just waiting for something to open up. And a year ago, there were only 12 head coach positions in this league. There are going to be 15 next season. So the opportunities are increasing and obviously more teams joining the WNBA. So more of these coaches are going to get the opportunity. But I think we're also going to see some curveballs like with the Portland Fire, where you're looking at the familiar names in WNBA circles, and then they go ahead and they select somebody from the NBA side, Alex Samara being that person. So we'll see exactly how this pans out. For Sandy Brondello, this is great news. She gets to continue her coaching career for an expansion franchise, which I honestly think after seeing Natalie Nakase's first season, there's an advantage to coaching an expansion team because as an expansion team head coach, you get to say, okay, this is the style of play that I want my team to play. And you get to go ahead and get those players. And when I interviewed Natalie Nakase last year, she talked to me about how that's kind of an underrated component, that you're not just taking over a roster of players that maybe play a specific play style that wouldn't be your preferred style. You get to go and collaborate with your general manager and figure out which international players you want to target, who you want in the draft, who you want in the expansion draft, who you want to go after in free agency. Like, you are starting from scratch. So somebody like Sandy Brondello, who is intimately familiar with this league, she can figure out, okay, this is the vision of what this organization wants to be like from day one, and go ahead and get that player. And I think Natalie Nakase, you saw the fruits of that. She made the playoffs in year 1. She was named coach of the year in year 1. Not saying that that's all because she had power to decide who was going to be on the team, but in a way, she was able to build out an identity. That Valkyrie's team had a very clear identity. They had a competitive spirit that I don't know that you can just coach it. You might also need to get players that have that in, within them. And then looking at some of the coaches near the bottom of league standings, like there were some times where I was like, you know what, I think Tyler Marsh, who was also an Aces assistant alongside Nakase, he might be in a tougher spot here. Like he has a roster that has more clear flaws, or at least yes to be forced to coach a team that plays in a certain way. So this is a good opportunity for Sandy Brondello. It's fitting to me that she's coaching the first, the only team right now that's not in America, Canada's team. She's obviously an Australian basketball legend who also is the head coach of the Australian women's national basketball team, who won the bronze medal in the Paris Olympics. So congratulations to Sandy Brondello. Congratulations to the Toronto Tempo, who made their first big hiring decision here for head coach. And we'll see. I bet in the next couple weeks here, we'll get a couple more head coaching hiring announcements. As always, we have instant reactions and analysis here on WNBA Today on CLNS. Go check out my full-length interview with Morgan Tuck, general manager of the Connecticut Sun. That was a lot of fun to hear from her directly about her first year as general manager. She's only 31, and she was a WNBA player just a couple years back. So pretty cool story there. And subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like. Let us know what you think. Let me know what you think about this hiring decision and who else might be selected as head coach. Are there any candidates that I forgot to mention that you really like? Let us know in the comments. We'll have more reactions and analysis on WNBA Today all offseason.